Masechet Baba Kama Daf Non Zayin, following up on the Mishnah that said that the laws of Ona'ah do not apply to land, slaves, and kodashim, kodesh animals. We have now a follow-up. Amar Rav Chasa Ba'e Rabbi Ameh, Ona'ah en lahem, bitul mikach yesh lahem, or en lahem. So Rav Chasa quotes a question that Rabbi Ameh asked. Says, I understand regarding land and consecrated animals that the law of ona'ah does not apply. But what if it's not, that's if it's 1/6 of overcharge or undercharge. But what if it's more than 1/6? In which case, normally, the sale would be canceled. Does that apply to land and consecrated animals and slaves? Or that law also does not apply? Amar Rav Nachman Hadar, Amar Rav Chasa Pashit Rabbi Ameh. Rav Nachman said, after Rav Chasa quoted the question, then he also said that Rabbi Ameh resolved the question, and he said, Ona'ah en lahem bitul mikach yesh lahem. Although the law of ona'ah does not apply if it's precisely 1/6, then you can go back and get your money back. That does not apply to this category. However, if it's more than 1/6 away from the normal price, then the sale can be cancelled. Rabbi Yonah Amar, Ahekteshot. Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar, Akarkaot. V'tarva mishmed Rabbi Yochanan Amiru, Ona'ah en lahem, bitul mikach yesh lahen. The question is, does it apply to all things on the list or only some of them? So Rabbi Yonah says it only applies to some of the things on the list regarding Hekteshot. There, it's cancelled. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, no, it applies to karkaot and land. If it's too much, then it's cancelled. And now both of these opinions, Rabbi Yonah and Rabbi Yirmiyah, were both explaining the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, who said that although there's no law of ona'ah when it's exactly 1/6, the transaction is cancelled if it's more than 1/6. Now, do they totally disagree with each other, or there's some overlap? The one who said that regarding hekteshot, if there's a big discrepancy, then the sale is cancelled, would say all the more so for land. Regarding consecration, there's less of a reason to say that it can be cancelled, because one is making a transaction with the Bet HaMikdash, so who's the party on the other side, right? Is God giving you a bad deal? How does it work? So if you say it applies to hekteshot, then all the more so to any land transactions, also the sale will be cancelled. But one who says that the sale is cancelled regarding land would not say that the sale is cancelled regarding consecrated property, because there you'd follow the opinion of Shemuel. He says it actually works both ways. If one acquires something from Hekdesh and overpays, okay, so who cheated you? No, the sale goes through. You can't go back. And also, if you have something Hekdesh and you desacralize it, for, let's say it's worth 100, and an animal worth 100, and you desacralize it onto one peruta, it works, even though it's way under, and you'll have to pay the difference. Nevertheless, the transaction works, and Bet HaMikdash can't go back and say, hey, this big animal is from 100, it's only 1 penny you gave. Forget it, it's cancelled. No, they don't say that. It does work. That's what Shemuel says. Tenan hatam. Imaya kodesh ba'amom yasa lecholin v'sarich lasot lo damim. Mishnah in Masechet Timurah says that if there is an animal, a holy animal that was blemished, and then you replace it with a different one, so it becomes chulin, because it has a blemish, so you have to do that. Ba'amum, yasa lechulin. However, sarich lasot lo damim, you still have to make up the difference in monetary value. If you had an animal worth 1,000 that was consecrated, now you change it out into an animal that's worth only 500, you're still going to have to pay the other 500. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, yasa lechulin devar Torah v'sarich lasot lo damim min divrehem. V'resh Lakish amar af sarich lasot lo damim min haTorah. Machloket, that payment, is it doraita d'Rabbanan? Everybody agrees that the animal itself that you switch out, that is a Torah law. But the fact that you have to pay the additional 500 to the Hekdesh because the second animal was smaller, that, according to Yochanan, is only midrabanan. However, Shakish says, but the payment also of the extra 500 is a requirement mideoraita. Now, b'ma yaskinan? Ilema b'chidei ona'a, b'ha lema resh lakish tarich lasot lo damim devar Torah v'hatenan. Elu devrim she'en lehem ona'a hakarkaot v'abadim v'ashtarot v'ahekdeshot. What case are we discussing? If it's a case where the difference between the old consecrated animal and the new one is 1/6 the amount of ona'a, well, in this case, would Resh Lakish really say that you have to pay the difference mid-deoraita? We learned in our Mishnah, not so, that the following things, there's no law of ona'ah, including land, slaves, deeds, and hekdeshot. That's our case, and there's no law of ona'ah. So certainly mid-deoraita, the Resh Lakish could not say that. Ela bitul mikach. Rather must be talking about that it's more, like my case, of $500 difference for a sale of 1,000. So this would be the amount of more than ona'ah that would be worthy of canceling the entire transaction. That well, in that case, would Rabbi Yochanan say that you have to pay the difference only midrabanan, but not midoraita? After all, we saw that there was a machloket about what case this principle applies to, that there's no ona'ah, but there is bitul mekach, and Rabbi Yonah said that it applies to hekdesh, so at least according to him, even though it's true, Rabbi Yonah said it only applies to land, but let's follow Rabbi Yonah, who says it applies to hekdesh, and both of them were saying their laws in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that although ona'ah does not apply, cancellation of the sale does apply. So therefore, according to the Biyonah, here's a case of hekdeshot, where someone takes something that's worth 1,000 and then redeems it for something that's only worth 500, and so that's going to be a big difference. And if you don't pay the difference, then that transaction is invalid. But if the transaction is valid, then you have a problem because you have an animal that's a Baal Mum. So clearly, according to Yochanan, on the Deoraita level, you're going to have to pay the difference. So it doesn't make sense to say that it's talking about something, a change that's more than bitul mekach, more than 1/6. So now we have a problem. So we're going to say, it is in fact a large difference in the price. And I'm going to have to switch around the opinions. And actually, Rabbi Yochanan is going to be the one that says that one has to pay the difference on the deoraita level, because he's the one that says that regarding hekdeshot, although there's no law of ona'ah, there is a law of a cancellation of the transaction, and so you better pay the difference so the transaction will not be canceled. Now we ask, now what's at the root of the difference between Rabbi Yochanan and the Shakish? B'dishmuel, damashmuel, hekdesh shaveh maneh shechilelo al shaveh peruta mecholal, mor it le dishmuel, umor let le dishmuel. They're arguing with whether they agree with Shemuel or not. Shemuel said that if you have a consecrated animal worth 100, and you redeem it for something that's just a peruta, it doesn't have to be animal or anything else, whatever it is, that you are redeeming, the transaction works. So according to Resh Lakish, yes, he agrees that it will work, and therefore you have to pay the difference, but only midrabanan. If you at the Doraita level, it works no matter what. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says that he does not agree with Shemuel, and he thinks that if you don't pay the difference, then the transaction will be null and void. And so, no, it's not sufficient, and therefore on the Deoraita level, one has to pay the difference in the amount. Or another way to answer the question above, maybe everybody agrees with the principle of Shemuel. Everybody agrees with the principle of Shemuel, that even if you take something that was worth 100 and consecrate it to something that's worth 1, that's totally fine. The difference of opinion is that Rabbi Yochanan says, Bidi avad, if you did it, then it's okay, right? It went through, but lechatechila, you should not do that. And therefore, certainly you're going to have to pay, no matter what, you're going to have to pay the difference in the amount from on a deoraita level. However, Resh Lakish says even lechatechila, one can take something that's worth 100 and redeem it for something that's worth just 1 peruta. You can even do that lechatechila, and therefore the payment of the difference is required only midrabanan. Or a third answer, or you know what? We'll go back to our original suggestion that the Mishnah in Masechet Temorah is talking about a case where the difference between the blemished animal and the new animal is 1/6. And you know what? You don't have to switch around the opinions of Rabbi Yochanan and the Shakish. Instead, we can explain that they are arguing regarding the opinion of Rav Chisda. But Rav Chisda kamipalge de Amar. Mai en lahem ona'a enan betorat ona'a de'afilu pachot mikede ona'a chozer. He says, when we say that the ona'a does not apply to these cases of kodashim and so on, then it doesn't mean that that's not a leniency that, you know what, the sale applies no matter what, but rather it's a stringency. They don't have the law. They don't have the protection of ona'ah. See, ona'ah is a stringency, but it's also a leniency. It means that if it's 1/6 or less, then the sale is valid. If it's less than a 6, you can't complain, right? That's it. It goes through. And so regarding movable items, you have the protection of ona'ah. However, if regarding hekdesh, even less than ona'ah, you know what? You change and you can cancel the whole thing. And 1/6 also, instead of getting money back, you cancel the entire thing. That's the machloket. And according to this, Resh Lakish agrees with Rav Chisda. And Resh Lakish now is the one, like we said originally, he's the one that says on Doraita level you have to pay. Why? Because there is no protection of ona'ah, and since it's a 6 or less, there's no protection, so you have to pay on the Doraita level. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with Rav Chisda, and he thinks that there is no ona'ah, meaning as a leniency. There's no ona'ah, does not apply to hekdesh, and therefore, since it's only a difference of 1/6, therefore, although you have to pay, it's only midrabanan, because the sale will go through no matter what. Me'etibe. Now we have a challenge against Rav Chisda. Here we say that the laws of interest and overcharging, undercharging apply to layman, regular deals between two people. But the laws of interest and the prohibition of interest and the prohibition of overcharging, undercharging do not apply to hekdesh. It seems from here that the laws of a layperson are more stringent than the laws regarding hekdesh, and Rav Chisda said the opposite, that for ona'ah is more stringent when it comes to hekdesh. So we answer, Mi alim matnitin deokimna betorat ona'ah hachiname rebit vedin ona'ah lahejot ve'en rebit vedin ona'ah lahekdesh. Wait, is this baraita stronger than our Mishnah? And we already answered in our Mishnah that it means that there's no law at all. There's no protection of ona'ah in the case of hekdesh. So in fact, it means that hekdesh is more stringent. So here also in this baraita, we can explain it similarly, that ribit and the law of ona'ah apply to hejot, meaning the protection of ona'ah applies to hejot, but the law of interest does not apply to hekdesh, and the protections of ona'ah do not apply to hekdesh. For hekdesh, even 1/6 and less, the sale can be cancelled. Well, if so, what are you going to do with the continuation of that baraita that says this is a way in which laws of lay people are more stringent than hekdesh? So that means it's supposed to be more stringent. Does that mean that ona'ah is more stringent for hejot because it does not apply to hekdesh, meaning in a lenient way? Doesn't it mean that? This is no, at a beat. Maybe this principle is only going on the beat. At a beat is a way in which the transaction of a layperson is more stringent, has a prohibition of ribit over hekdesh, but the other way around for ona'ah, actually, the laws of hekdesh don't have the protection of ona'ah, and even less than 1/6, the sale will be cancelled. In that case, we ask, litni nameh zeh chomer behekdesh behejot ona'ah. So how come the baraita doesn't also say, well, there is one way in which hejot is hekdesh, that's ribit, and add, there's another way in which hekdesh is more stringent than hejot, and regarding ona'ah. Why not say the principle in the other way, or other way around also? And we answer, hachi hashta, what are these two cases the same? Bishlam zechom behejot mehekdesh vetula, el hekdesh zechomer vetula. It makes sense to say a principle that ribit is the one way, and it's the only way, in which transactions between two lay people are more stringent than a transaction with Hekdesh, right? That's it. Ribit, and this is the only one. But the other way around, for Hekdesh, is Ona'ah the only way that Hekdesh is more stringent than that transactions with lay people? There are many, many other ways in which a transaction regarding Hekdesh is more stringent. So it wouldn't make sense to say this is a Chomer. There's lots of them. Or rather, it's more interesting to talk about the other way around, that here is one example where Hejot is more stringent than Hekdesh. So that's worth pointing out. The other way around is actually not worth pointing out. We now ask about that Baraita, Ribit Hekdesh Hechi Dameh. What's a case of charging interest regarding consecrated property? Ilema de'osfe gizbar me'a be'me'a ve'asrim, v'alo ma'al ha'gizbar, v'chavan shema'al ha'gizbar yasum me'otav lacholin v'ahu lehu le'dehejot. If you say that it's talking about the temple treasurer who takes some consecrated money and he lends out 100 to get back 120, well, that is a case of interest. The problem is that the temple treasurer is not allowed to do that. He can't just go and loan out temple treasury money. And therefore, the temple treasurer, by doing that, commits me'ilah. And the second he lends it out, and commits me'ilah, then that money is no longer consecrated. It's chulin, it's regular money. And so this is not a case of ribit of consecrated money, because now it's ribit of non-consecrated money. So that can't be the case. Amar Rav Hoshaya, hacham askinan kegon shekibel alav l'sapek selatot me'arba ve'amedu mishalosh. So Rav Hoshaya says we're talking about a case where you have a provider of fine flour. He sells fine flour, and he provides to the Bet HaMikdash. And they make a deal early on in the season. The Bet HaMikdash can do that. They have lots of reserves of money, so they get a good price. And they do so at a time when you can get 4 se'ah for 1 selah. And then later on, at the time of delivery, the price got more expensive, and the price is only 3 se'ah for 1 selah. So what happens in such a case? We see in the Braita, the Kedetanya, HaMakabel alav sapek sa'atot me'arba v'amdu mishalosh mesapek me'arba. Mishalosh amdu me'arba mesapek me'arba. Shiad hekdesh ala elyona. The law is that no matter if the price goes up or down, the Bet HaMikdash always has the upper hand. They're always going to get 4 no matter what. So if they set the price when at the time when it's cheaper and you can get 4 se'ah, and then it goes down and then it gets more expensive, they still get the higher amount for what they paid originally. And if they made the deal when it was 3 se'ah per selah, and then it got cheaper, then the provider has to give 4. And so you see that they get no matter what. So in this case here, where they set a price that when it was cheaper, and then it becomes more expensive, they still get more stuff at the end. So this kind of looks like interest, and it would be prohibited if it was 2 laymen that were doing business in this way to pay for one amount and then get more at the end than the price is at that point, because basically he gave him they gave him a certain amount. He gave him 1 se'ah, 1 selah at the beginning, and now he's getting 4, which is worth more than a selah. So the Bet HaMikdash is getting more at a later time than what they paid originally. So that is interest, but it's permitted when it comes to the Bet HaMikdash. Rav Papa amar hacha be'avnei binyan ha'mesurot ha'gizbar askinan kedeshmuel damar Shmuel bonin bechol ve'achar kach makdishin. Or another case of interest is regarding the building material, the building stones that were given over to the treasurer from the quarry, from the stone owners. In that case, it is a donation. However, Shmuel taught that they do not consecrate it while they're building. The problem is that if they consecrate it right away when it's donated, then we're afraid that the builders, they're going to get tired, they're going to sit on it, lean on it, and that would be committing me'ilah. So it's much easier to work with when they are not consecrated. So they would not consecrate it, build it, and then once it was the wall was built, then they would consecrate the entire wall. So in the meantime, when it's not consecrated, the temple treasurer, if he wants to, he can lend it out for interest, and that would not be me'ilah. So what doesn't have the problem of the first suggestion that we had, and so he can lend it out and get more back. And that would be fine because it belongs to the Bet HaMikdash. Next part of the Mishnah says, En bahen tashlumei kefel, regarding slaves and documents, land, consecrated property. There's no law of a double payment. Menahane mileh, what's the source? The Tanur Banan. Al kol devar pesha kelal. This is in Shemot, in the laws of watchmen, that normally would have to pay double, or a thief that has to pay double. So here it uses klal upra luklat. On any matter of trespass, that's klal. Shor chamor seva al salma. Al sama, it mentions items, movable items here. Perat al kol abeda asher yomar chazar v'kalan. Any item that is lost. So this is a kalal again. Kalal upratu. Kalal iyatadan ela ke'ayin haperat. Ma perat mefurash davar mitatev gufo mamon. Avkol davar mitatev gufo mamon. So we generalize from the examples, and just like in the examples, these are all movable items that have intrinsic value. So we exclude anything. So to anything that is movable and has intrinsic value, that excludes yatsu karkaot she'ena mitaltelin, yatsu avadim she'ukshu lekarkaot, yatsu shtarot she'af al pi she'mitaltelin. En gufan mamon hekdeshot amar kera re'ahu velo hekdesh. So that excludes land, which is not movable. It also excludes slaves, because they have the same law as land, and it also excludes deeds because they don't have intrinsic value. It's just the writing in it that says you have the right to collect this debt or whatever. And hekdeshos are also included because the end of that pasuk says ra'ehu, which means only if it's from one person to another and not to the Bet HaMikdash. Furthermore, there's no payment of 4 or 5 in the case of, let's say, a consecrated animal that someone steals and sells or slaughters. Why is there no law of 4 and 5? Because it has to be 4 and 5 and not 3 or 4. In other words, since we know that you already don't pay double, so the 4 and 5 is the double is included in the 4 and 5. So if there's no double payment, then the 4 and 5 is going to be reduced down to 3 and 4. So there can't be 3 and 4, it has to be 4 and 5. So if there's no double payment, then there's no 4 and 5 payment either. The Mishnah continued and said that someone is given these items to watch, slave, land, consecrated items, or a deed, and these are shomer chinam. Normally shomer chinam has to take a vow in order to get out of paying, but in this case he doesn't. Here also we do a klal prat kelal from the law of shomer chinam, where it says if someone gives to his friend, that sounds like anything, but then it specifies money or vessels is an example. Then it says, and it is stolen, sounds like anything that's stolen. So we generalize from those examples, just like those examples are movable items that have intrinsic value. So to any movable items that have intrinsic value, then the shomer chinam will have to swear if they were lost or stolen. That excludes yasu karkaot she'ena mitaltelin, yasu abadim she'ukshu lekarkaot, yasu shtarot she'af al pi she'mitaltelin gufan mamon hekdeshot amar kera re'ahu velo shel hekdesh. So land is not movable, and slaves are the same as land, and deeds do not have intrinsic value. And hekdeshot, the end of the pasuk says, to his friend, and not that of someone else. Actually, it's in the beginning of the pasuk here, kiten ish el re'ahu. So it's only from layperson to layperson that one has to make a vow, but not if it's something that's consecrated. Noseh sachar eno meshalem. And similarly, a paid watchman also does not pay if it's lost or stolen, as he normally does, if it's one of these items. Lishmor, Hazar, Vekalal. And so here we look at the Pesukim a little bit later on. Then those Pesukim, the next chapter, the next paragraph after Shomer Chinam, Shomer Sachar, and says if someone gives to his friend, sounds like anything, and then it specifies these animals is a detail, and then V'chol Behema, so that's another generality. Kelal uperat ukelal iatadan elakena pedama perat mifrash dabar mitatevik for mamon, avkol dabar mitatevik for mamon. And so we learn that we generalize things that are similar to the detail, which are movable items, and that have intrinsic value. Yasu karkot she'enan mitaltelot. מטלטלין יעשו עבדים שהוקשו לקרקעות, יעשו שטרות שאף על פי שמטלטלין אין גופם מון הקדשות, אמר החמנה ראו ולא של הקדש, in the same derivation, similar derivation as before, not land because it's not movable, and not slaves because those are juxtaposed to land, and not deeds because they do not have intrinsic value, and not hekdesh because the pasuk says only for his fellow person and not that of consecrated animals. Baruch Adonai leolam, amen ve'amen.